Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey there, it's Alicia Cowan, and welcome to episode number 18 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. It is about mid-July as I'm recording this, and I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but around the Cowan household, we are in the midst of getting close to starting the back-to-school season, and we are getting all the school supplies ready, getting all the stuff ready. And I cannot believe it. It feels like summer flew by. So I hope you've been enjoying it and having a great time. Our plans for the end of the summer are to spend a couple of days with some really good friends that are coming to visit us. And they're like family to us. So we're really excited to see some friends we haven't seen in a really long time. They're coming down to the Tampa area. And we're just going to have a blast hanging out and seeing each other and catching up. And really kind of closing out the summer with a bang and get ourselves ready for this back to school season. I cannot believe I'm saying it. So that's what's kind of going around in the Cowan household. But what I want to talk to you about today is a theme that I've been hearing coming out of coaching conversations. And I want to kind of pull apart tough conversations that we may be avoiding. So I've been hearing a lot of you, of course. Again, one of the things I coach on a lot is avoiding or having tough conversations, and the nerves and the nervousness and all the things that we do to avoid having tough conversations. There is so much wrapped in it. And I think you can go out, and if you even just Google having tough conversations, I mean, there are books and podcasts and webinars. I mean, there's so much content out there around having tough conversations. So I'm going to pull apart a little bit about why this is such a big thing for us. I think it goes in line with a lot of the same kind of baseline fears that we have around like public speaking or right? Any of that face-to-face interaction that we have as humans, there is some baseline similarities of why we avoid it and why we have such hesitation around it. So what I want to talk about today is at times there are situations where our brain will try to trick us. It'll try to trick us into keeping us safe. It'll offer us really altruistic, nice, fluffy sounding sentences that are well-intended, and our brain is doing its best to try to keep us safe. And so it'll tell us certain things that trick us into avoiding these tough conversations or having difficult one-on-ones or delivering feedback. And I want you to, as a leader, executive leader, start to catch on to this, catch on to your brain. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to give you an example, I think that'll best illuminate it. So I was coaching a leader, and we were talking about a succession plan, or talking about development of the team and the direct reports that they have. And, they have some direct reports on their team that want to be promoted. Totally normal, right? Very typical. They're, talking about career plans, career development, future growth, all that. And of course, these direct reports are saying, yes, I'd love to be promoted into the next level at some point, to take on more responsibility, to do more. And this leader had a very specific sentence that when I asked her about delivering some of the feedback around whether or not they were ready or not, she had a very specific sentence that was holding her back. And so when we're talking through what these conversations were looking like with her direct reports, she mentioned, she's like, for different reasons, these leaders and these direct reports are not ready for the next level right now. And there was no conversation that they were not going to be ready ever. It was more so just there's some things that they still needed to work on in order to develop and be ready to take on that next level and that next promotion, right? Again, all normal, very typical, right? And so I asked, hey, have we had these conversations yet? Have you talked to them about where they stand and what they need to do, where the skill gap is, all that. And the sentence again that I referenced before was the fact that she said, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And so when you first hear it, that sounds so nice, right? In some ways, that sounds super nice. Like you're so considerate and you're like thoughtful, right? I don't want to hurt their feelings. Sounds really kind. And not saying it's unkind in some ways. If you think about this truly, the brain, again, what it's doing there, it then justifies avoiding that conversation. So if your brain tells you, if you think, I have to have this conversation, I want to deliver this feedback about where this direct report stands, what they're doing well, what they're not, and where they need to continue to grow. If your thought about that conversation is, I don't want to hurt their feelings, you can see how that holds us back. And while it sounds super nice and it sounds altruistic, in actuality, if we really dig in and play this out, it's more for us, and it's us holding ourselves back, and it's us justifying our own discomfort and why we want to avoid feeling uncomfortable. So let's dig in and talk more about that. So at this moment, when we say, hey, I just don't want to hurt their feelings, that's where I want to hit the pause button as a coach. And I want to say, okay, when we hit that pause button, we say, let's really look at that sentence and that thought that we're having, because it's just a thought. It's not fact-based. A lot of time, what we want to do is jump and say, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And we jump to assuming that our words will in turn hurt them. And we assume how they're going to think and feel about our words. Okay. So when we hit the pause button, our brain, we want to look at this. Our brain likes to stay safe. Okay. It likes to keep us warm, cozy in the cave, not changing. It likes to really conserve energy, and it doesn't like change, right? And so this is pushing us out of our comfort zone in a big way, and changing what we do day to day. And it really likes to stay comfortable, and it likes to keep us, again, like perceived within the tribe and within the community. And when you have to, as a leader, step out of that and lead from the front, meaning that you have to separate yourself sometimes from this like warm community. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we want to stay with the herd. And when you separate from the herd, there's an option that you could literally be eaten by wild animals. I know this sounds wild, but when we really look at it and examine it, it really is us trying to keep ourselves safe by not doing something that feels uncomfortable, awkward. It again brings up all the fight or flight when we have to have a conversation that we perceive as a threat. Okay. And I want to really pause and examine that, because again, I think I've talked about in prior podcasts about our fear and why it holds us back, and some of these other topics, but I know, we keep reiterating it because it shows up in different ways that sounds so nice and warm and fuzzy. Again, like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I'm just not going to have a conversation. But that's what I want at baseline. That's a root of what's happening there. And we don't want to feel uncomfortable, right? Because again, the perception there is danger for ourselves. So that's where when I hear sentences like that, like, I don't want to do this because it might hurt their feelings, I want to pause, because that's the stuff that it's really tricky, because it sounds really nice and it sounds like it's really like kind and warm, but really what's happening when you examine it, it's all for our own feelings there. Okay. So when our brain offers us those sentences, what can we do? It's offering us this nice, neat little sentence, this nice thought wrapped up in a nice bow, and it feels so warm and fuzzy. How do we coach? How do we self-coach on that? And what do we do? So I think if you, again, start to notice and start to look at your brain and start to notice the thoughts that are coming through when you have some difficult conversations or something that you're avoiding, look at some of those sentences that you're thinking and what's coming up for you. And when you think about, maybe, again, this is an example just of a tough conversation, but it could be anything you're avoiding. And you're having some of these sentences like that. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Ask yourself why. So it's just learning, again, hitting the pause button and asking why. In this situation, really digging in and saying, okay, what will hurt this person's feelings potentially? Like, what are we assuming that will hurt? And when you really look at that, in this situation, I was coaching this leader and we really dug in, like, okay, we assume it will hurt their feelings because you will say what, right? And in this situation, it was all about, the fact that they may not be ready for the next role. Here's why, here's things you need to work on. And again, the other person may decide that that's hurtful and I'm upset. If we don't say those things, you can also examine on the flip side, what is the alternative? And so again, write all those things down if that's helpful, but asking yourself, what's the alternative? In this situation, it was to not deliver the feedback, to not tell this direct report about where they stand. And all it did was delay a conversation, right? Because if this person didn't get that next promotion, it really only delayed and really never gave them the opportunity to understand where they are and where they stand, what the feedback is, and to give them some breathing room to improve or to make changes, or, to know that they own some of the capability to shape their future. And so by not having the conversation and delaying it and not telling this person where they stand, on the flip side of that, it didn't feel great either, right? And it only delayed this, quote unquote, this hurt or this pain that this person was trying to protect this person from. And so that alternative, right? Either saying, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And again, having that lead to avoidance of a conversation versus the alternative of what could happen, right? So go down the road and end up having a conversation at a later date, and then having not told them the entire time that they could have been working on those things in order to get promoted, and then just, delaying and avoiding it. And that alternative was not attractive, right? And so we also looked at it and said, okay, when we make those assumptions, right, of how they're feeling, like, I think I'm going to hurt their feelings and I'm afraid of hurting their feelings, when we really pick it apart, it's about the discomfort. Again, there is, of course, a way to deconstruct this conversation and make sure you say it in a way that you feel comfortable with, right? But there also is that piece of it where we notice it's our own discomfort that we're really worried about, right? That when we go into the conversation, we don't feel comfortable going through that awkwardness, that discomfort, and putting yourself out there and having a very direct, candid, transparent conversation. And that's, again, typically most leaders, when they work through this, that is not usually a great reason not to have that conversation. And when they really look at it and really pull it apart and examine it, we notice we're avoiding and we're doing it more for our own comfort rather than truly caring about the other person. Because if we're being thoughtful about the other person, typically people would want that feedback and they want that information and they want to know where they stand. And us just indulging in our own fears and feelings is not typically the kind thing and the right thing to do. And so I think it's important, again, so to bring this all back, what you could do is, if you examine it, why am I avoiding this? Or why am I not wanting to have this conversation? And if I don't do it, what is my alternative? And again, I can definitely, there's other ways to work through even just the mechanics of having that conversation. But really, this is more when you're finding yourself avoiding and not having difficult conversations. How do you pick apart what's happening for me here? And is it more about me and my feelings and not wanting to have it? Or is it more about or is it truly about the other person? And I find when we start thinking about the other person rather than our own discomfort with having it, then we really truly can cross over to the other side and get to the point where we can move through that conversation. Some tricks of the trade: you can just tell your brain when your brain starts popping up like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. You can tell your brain like, you know what? I hear you. We might hurt their feelings. They might end up getting upset by the things that we're saying because they're thinking certain things about it. We might, but again, when we look at the alternative, is it something we're willing to move through? We can feel that discomfort of this conversation and we can work through this because it is truly what we want to do, right? And it's the right thing and it's aligned with why we want to do it. Okay. So I hope that's helpful. I know it gets a little meta. We're not just talking about just the mechanics of like, what do I need to say? What do I need to do? What do I need to how do I need to act in these situations? But I truly think just the examination of some of our thinking. And again, when we avoid these tough conversations, there typically is more in it that is about us than it is about the other person. And it usually boils down to not wanting to feel the difficult feelings that we need to feel to move through that tough conversation. So I pause there on that thought for you. So I want you to kind of really look at that when you're having an avoidance moment. What is the thought that's holding you back, right? And again, in this example, I want to hurt their feelings. It can sound super nice, super kind, super altruistic, but really look at it and say, is that thought factual, or is it just something that's my brain's coming up with in order for me to avoid having this conversation? Okay. All right. And as always, I am so happy to talk to you about this. I talk to leaders about having tough conversations or about what is going on for them and what's happening with their brains. And the more that you understand it, the more that you really look at it for yourself and get in the habit of practicing this and really understanding where our thinking comes from. It is really a great tool that can help you in so many different situations. I use some very specific examples, but I can promise you this type of coaching and examining your thinking can help across all different types of scenarios here. So happy to help. You can reach out to me on my website. It's Alicia Cowan Coaching, ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. And I'm so happy we can do a one-on-one consult, talk about some of your problems, start to address some of your issues right away, and see if long-term coaching is a good fit for you. All right. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. As always, thank you so much for listening and have a great rest of your summer. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.